Hi, I'm Zan Armstrong. I'm a data visualization developer at Observable. And today I'm here to talk about 3 simple, flexible tools for empowered data visualization. And if you're anything like me, sometimes it can be really overwhelming to do visualization. It can feel like you have to know all of the tools before you can do anything. But let's be honest, at home, we mostly use our hammer, our screwdriver, and our Allen key. And in visualization, this is our line chart, bar chart, pie chart, maybe our scatter plot. But there's another set of tools that we have at home that are really simple too, but simple in a different way. Things like string, thread, needles, sewing kit, wire, and pliers. Tools where the way you use them has to do with the tool and the problem you're trying to solve, or the thing that you're trying to create, the reason you're using the tool in the first place, and your understanding of this problem, and what you're trying to do. And in visualization, I think of these tools as making color have meaning, many small charts, and that order matters. And this is where it's really about empowerment, because this type of tool is about matching the tool with the problem, with the context, and the way that you use the tool depends on what you're trying to do with it. It depends on what you understand about the problem, about why you're visualizing the data in the first place. So today we're going to talk about how to do this and how to do this in an empowering way. But first, we need some data. Today, throughout the talk, we're going to talk about the unemployment rate by US county. This is the number of people unemployed divided by the number of people in the labor force in each county in the US for the years 2000 to 2020. And of course, in the US, we have 50 states with many counties per state. They vary vastly in size, from 10 million in LA to a few thousand in our smallest counties. And just some economic background, 2007, 2019 were both strong economies. 2009 was the peak of the recession, the Great Recession or financial crisis. And of course, 2020, there was a lot of unemployment related to COVID. So let's dive in. How do we make color have meaning? Let's start by taking a look at, when I answer the question, what is the unemployment rate by county in the US? And we'll do what anybody would do. We'll make a map. The year is 2009. We're going to color the map based on the min and max in the entire data set. And we've got a map. Here we go. And a histogram. And what do you notice? I definitely see that yellow county in Southern California and the green one next to it. Maybe I noticed some greens in the Southeast, kind of coming up to Michigan. Maybe I noticed the middle's more purple, but I really don't see all that much. And if I look at the histogram of the counties, how many counties have 5% unemployment or 10% unemployment, I start to see what's going on, because that yellow and green that I have in my legend for those most extreme values isn't really showing up in my histogram. There are so few counties that have above 15% unemployment. So half of our color scheme is, or almost half of our color scheme, is for very, very few of our counties. And most of our data, the bulk of our data, is in this purplish bluish place, between maybe 5 and 10%. But what if we had a different maximum? What if the maximum wasn't 29.4? What if it was the mid-20s? Or high teens, or even 15? And we can stop at 15, just kind of looking at that's kind of where our data starts to have more of the bulk of our data. And what do you see now? And it's fine if you want to go ahead and pause the video and take a look. I definitely see more definition in the Southeast and in Michigan. Maybe Florida's a little greener, maybe Maine's a little greener. That middle section with the low unemployment rate, the purples, is taking on more definition. Looks like it's more kind of in the north, and peters out a little bit more in Texas. And in California, and now I notice a difference between what's happening on the coast in California and Oregon and what's happening inland. It's more unemployment, more yellow inland, and kind of just the sharp change. So here we have, let's get back to the slideshow, start from the beginning, and let's get back to the deck. There we go. So just by changing the max value, this is one simple change, just choosing a max value based on what we're seeing in the data, we're now seeing a lot more information on our map. Our map is so much more useful to us. And this might feel a little scary, why am I making a choice? Is that the right choice? And we can debate what that choice should be. here done kind of a data-driven sort of way, or we can make a decision about what makes sense to us. But it's not like the other choice was necessarily a great choice. It's a very somewhat arbitrary one. Like, what if the max value happened to be 40? What if it was 20? Maybe not 20. What if it was 23 or something? There's a lot of, we're giving a lot of power to that single most extreme data point. So let's take that power back and make a decision. And this is actually what's done with both the D3 choropleth example and the color scheme used by the data provider in their own set of maps. And in both cases, actually choose a min and max, and then also actually choose a set of discrete buckets between that min and max. And you might be wondering, like, why are they cutting off at 8? That looks really extreme looking at this map. But looking at the longer time period, 8 is actually a pretty high amount of unemployment for a county to have. So it makes a lot more sense when we think about this in the time. And the fact that it looks extreme here is kind of because it was a really extreme year. So I think this is actually a pretty great color scheme that they're using. There's other data-driven ways of doing this, finding the breakpoints, things like quantiles and junks. But what I want to talk about now is how do we tie this back to that question, the question we have? And maybe what we care about the most is where is the unemployment rate the highest or the lowest or the middle? Maybe we want a diverging color scheme with red for the high values and white in the middle and blue for the low values. And looking at the data, we can set the data at the midpoint, at the middle, at the median. Here, that's 8.9%. But if you're in a county with 8% unemployment, does it really make sense to color that white for the middle? Or maybe that's actually kind of high unemployment. Maybe that should be colored red also. Because maybe the question you want to ask is not where is it highest, but where is it high? Not where it's lowest, but where is it low? Using benchmarks we know from economics that are meaningful. And if we do that, we get a map like this. We put the middle at 5, our max at 10, our min at 0. And it's a really different map. This is really striking. But again, this was the depths of the recession. This was a big deal. And it makes sense that the map would reflect that reality. And we take this a step further, and we can actually turn this into 6 categories and make decisions about, like, well, where should these cut points be? And have a conversation about, like, well, why do we make those decisions? Do we agree on those decisions? The other thing that we get from this is that it helps a little bit with color perception, because as we know from optical illusions, maybe the science museum as a kid, the way you perceive color depends on the colors around it. So the same exact color gray might look darker or lighter depending on what it's surrounded by, which means that how we perceive the value of a particular county actually depends on the counties around it. And one way of getting around that is by going to having kind of just 6 colors. You have less of that discrepancy of, like, exactly what shade is that, how dark or light is it, when you just have 6 colors to choose from. Moreover, this means that we can actually make multiple charts. We can have a chart for each category, or we could group them and say, okay, the lows go together and the highs go together, and have 2 charts, one for just the lows and one for just the highs, or maybe 3 and throw the middles in there too. So let's recap. What have we done so far? We started with colors, and we weren't even honestly using our yellow and light green that much. We made those more useful by changing the max and being more decisive about what our max should be. And then we actually switched from colors to concepts like low, moderate, and high, making explicit assumptions about where to put those breakpoints, assumptions that we can question and have a conversation about. And you might say, well, this is less information. Like, we went from a lot of different colors to now we just have 6 categorical colors. And we can't tell the difference anymore between, say, 20 and 25. And that's true, we can't. But before, could we tell the difference between 5 and 8? Could you really see the difference between that bluish purple and that bluish green? Are you sure? And maybe it's more important to tell the difference between 5 and 8 than it is to tell the difference between 20 and 25. One way I judge this is a principle that I learned at the IEEE Viz conference in 2014 about if the data is meaningfully different, then the visualization should look meaningfully different. And so now if we look at 2019 as well as 2009, years that we know the economy was really, really different in the United States, we can get a sense of, well, do they look different? And on the left, maybe not that much. Yes, definitely more purple, definitely not the same map, but maybe not as different as we might expect. On the right, these look really different. One map is mostly blue, one map is mostly red. And it also gives us the chance to ask new questions. Well, what about those outliers? Or what about those ones that are red when the economy was mostly good? Or what else might be going on? Maybe it even sparks our imagination to ask about the labor force. What was happening to the labor force? And now that we're starting to have a better understanding of the unemployment rates. So to recap, let's make color have meaning based on what you know is important, either from the data, what you learned already, from your context, your domain expertise, from outside information, or for what you're trying to understand, what your question is. And use that to say, well, what should the min or max be, or what buckets would be meaningful? And if you want to check this, ask yourself, well, can anybody looking at your chart say blue means this, or areas with this type of data are colored this? Can anybody answer that question? And will everybody have the same answer for that question? Or will some people kind of be like, well, the areas with the high unemployment are green, and somebody else can be like, well, they're definitely yellow. And you might not even know that you have these different assumptions going on. So let's move on from color and talk about many small charts. And we've already sort of done that, right? We saw that we could have a color and a chart for each category. And this is a really powerful way using these highlight colors where you focus attention on just one category of a set of categories, and the rest is provided for context. And you can use this with all types of different charts, and it's super powerful. This is actually a little bit less common way of doing small multiples, small charts, many small charts. The more common way of doing it is actually just to have a different chart for each different type of data. So each year in your data set, for example. So here we have 21 charts, one for each year, same color map for all of them, same color scheme. And we can compare and contrast these and look at different parts of them and see like what's happening as we go through. But maybe we don't actually want all 21. Maybe we notice, hey, there's some big contrast here between 07 and 09, between 2019 and 2020. What if we just focus on 4 that we can look at with maps or with histograms showing the number of counties in each bin? And even with these histograms and maps, we can tell that even the years that were both strong economies, they aren't exactly the same. There's differences. For example, 2007, that whole kind of like Eastern Mideastern section is red or gray, whereas there's more blues in there, kind of lower in Michigan and Indiana and Ohio than we saw previously. Or in the histograms, we also there's a bit of a different shape as well. So getting some interesting comparing and contrasting here. But that might lead us to remember that, hey, land is not people. And in fact, most of the population of the US lives in a very small portion of the land. And even here, like you can only see New York in this chart on the left because you can see Long Island, that like pink switch. Manhattan is so small and the 5 boroughs are so small, they wouldn't even really show up on this map as a color, even though millions of people live there. So we could instead resolve this with something like a Dorling cartogram, where we actually draw circles for each county instead of coloring the area of the county. And the size of the circle has to do with the number of people in the labor force. And here we're coloring it just in kind of, is it one of those largest ones or not? Is it a big one or not? And we could use the same type of map with our color scheme instead and really focus a little bit more on what's happening with the population, not what's happening in the area. And this is a great way to compare and contrast. These are Dorling cartograms or force bubbles. There's also a lot of other types of maps. There's a whole great set of research and amazing examples. But this also might lead us to wonder, well, what other options do we have? We've learned a lot from the map, but what might else we want to know? What if it's not a map? What if something else matters? What if we want to understand more about these 30 counties or these 150 counties where most of the population resides? Perhaps you want to know the unemployment rate. Let's take a look at these 30 lines. It's not a bad chart, and we can definitely make it better. It's a good first draft. But there's a lot of overlap. It's hard to see things. Let's try our small multiples. Focus on the 4 years that we're paying attention to. And here we can start to see things. We definitely see kind of that biggest red line in each red bar in 2009 and 2020 definitely jumps out. In 2009, that red bar at the bottom is actually Detroit with the car crisis. In 2020, it's actually Las Vegas, which makes sense given what happened to travel and entertainment during the 2020 year. So we're seeing some good stuff here. We're seeing something, but it feels like maybe we could do more. And this brings us to our last topic, that order matters. And alphabetical is almost never what you want. One of the easiest things we can do instead of alphabetical is to try ordering by the metric that's in the chart. So let's do that. Let's order by the 2007 unemployment rate. And now we can start seeing some really interesting things. We can start comparing, okay, we got this clean, like max to min in the first chart. And how much does that pattern stick through the years? How much does it vary? And in the financial crisis, yeah, a lot of the highest values are still at the top. The ones that were kind of doing the worst, but okay, pre-recession, were doing the worst in the financial crisis, but not always. There's some exceptions. And same thing at the bottom of the chart. There's some bars that are a little bit higher as well. And we can see, hey, maybe 09 to 2020, it's not the exact same set of counties that are doing the worst. And if we actually order by states, this is alphabetical, but it's a way to kind of group. So now we're ordering by the state name. So we have Arizona, we have Phoenix, Arizona on top, and then a bunch of counties in California, and then some others, some New York. And now we might notice, that's interesting. Like we're starting to see some clumping, and California was pretty hard hit. Got these red bars near the top in 2009, and not as hard hit in 2020. And now maybe we're starting to wonder, like, well, can we compare this better? Can we focus our question more? Can we focus more on 2009 versus 2020 and on New York versus California? So let's switch up the graph that we're using. Let's now use a graph that only has data about 2009 and 2020, where the 2009 unemployment rate is a dot on the y-axis and the county is on the x-axis. And we have an arrow going up if the unemployment was worse in 2020 and down if the unemployment was better in 2020. And now that this is a little bit more compact, we can actually look at all 156. So we could look at the same chart form for all 156 counties that are in the top 50%, that have at least 200,000 potential workers in those counties. This maybe kind of looks like a mess, but we forgot to do something. We forgot to order it. So let's go ahead and do that. And here it is. Here's ordered by the 2009 unemployment rate. And it's so incredible what a difference these two charts are. The only difference is the order. With on the bottom chart, lower unemployment rate in 2009 is on the left, higher unemployment rate on the right. You can see that in the black dots increasing. And suddenly we can really see kind of what's the pattern, what's the normal, and what's the exception to the rule. In what cases do we actually see a big bump, a big change, or a small change, a big increase or a decrease? And not surprising, like where things were kind of doing better, we have more increases, and where things were doing worse, we have more decreases, returning to a mean. Or maybe there's other dynamics at play. So let's take a look at California and New York. So now we've got a different chart for California, different chart for New York, and this is where it gets really interesting. Because now we notice, most of the counties in New York are in the left half of the chart. They were doing relatively okay in 2009, whereas most of California is in the right half of the chart. They were doing relatively badly in 2009. And then for New York, every single county did worse in the 2020 recession and 2020 pandemic than in the 2009 recession. Whereas in California, all but Los Angeles, that's the little orange arrow, was doing better in 2020 than 2009. So now we get to have some insight into what's happening, what happened, how hard hit were each of these communities, each of these states in the recession in 2009, and how hard hit were they economically in terms of unemployment rates in 2020, and how were those different, and start to ask some new questions as well. And we've done this because with these three charts, we've used color, we've used small charts, and we've used order, and we've done them in a way that's also really informed. We're making decisions about what's important to us about this data. And we're using color and charts and order to really focus our attention and give us the chance to notice things that have to do with what we've discovered are important or what we knew was important going in. So I hope that you feel a little bit more empowered to think about what is important about your data And how can you use that to use color, small multiples, and order? And this might also be a little bit scary because there's no easy answers. Your choices really matter, but the default was already a choice. It was just a choice that you weren't making. It doesn't mean that it was a good choice or a responsible choice. And unfortunately, responsible data viz is not easy. Powerful data viz is not easy. But the good news is that it's not a blank slate. You're not starting from scratch when you open the visualization, when you open the data for the first time. You can bring in your domain expertise, and this gets you a way to do it responsibly, to be able to make your assumptions transparent, bring those assumptions into the visualization. Make it something that you can discuss and have a debate about, because at the end of the day, the question is, what do these numbers mean? So that's all I got today. I really appreciate you having me here today. Thank you so much to the Outlier team for inviting me. Thank you to you all for taking the time to spend with me today. We've got a whole bunch of resources and a bunch of thank yous and some follow-on materials. And these were all made with Observable Plot. Thank you so much to Phil and Mike for the work that you've done into that library, open source library. And not everything that's interesting made it into this talk. I love this chart. And I love thinking about the denominator, what's happening with the labor force, as well as the numerator and the ratio metric, what's happening with the unemployment rate. So look forward to future talks about denominators matter and maybe some nice stuff on Twitter with this chart. And I just wanted to close by sharing some of my holiday cookies with you. I made a DataViz themed set of cookies because that was fun. And all of these principles are in these cookies. So we've got small multiples, we've got highlight colors, we've got different types of colors, we've got diverging color scheme, and we even have order matters. So thank you so much. Really, really appreciate all your time. Thank you. Bye.